Going to be breaking down the 3-game slate in NBA today to give you guys the best props available on the board today for PrizePicks and Underdog. Let's get into it. But first, I am kind of starting a little bit of a different style of video today, more or less just in the presentation. Do want to just go over yesterday's recap because I do feel like it is a kind of a good, I don't want to say learning moment, but it was just like a weird slate yesterday where literally the best prop on the board that we had throughout the day was one that PrizePicks ended up pushing their prop down for Jared Allen. It was very strange in that manner that they actually bumped his fantasy score down. So that ended up being one that throughout the day I just kept hammering because the next ones here, like these all got bumped in some capacity. The players' projections got bumped in some capacity. And this is really a good example of why I typically like to bet the over fantasy score. Besides Zubac, I think Mitchell, Horford, and even Jaylen Brown, I think they would have got their over fantasy score. And that's really kind of what I'm trying to do in videos like this, is trying to find the players that are in the best positions to succeed, and then also trying to find the best props associated with that said player. But at the same time, if a player is a good play, that's kind of why I like to do fantasy score, because we don't know exactly how they're going to get there, how they're going to produce in that game, but we do know they are going to have a good game. That's typically why I like to default to fantasy score. But no, yesterday was not a good day. But thankfully, like everyone mentioned, like right away, oh, these props have already been bumped. I'm like, oh, that sucks. And then this one was actually bumped down. So it's strange. I ended up just like hammering Jared Allen throughout the day because of that. So hopefully you guys were able to take advantage of that as well. Just a weird day, honestly, on PrizePicks. The boards have been weird. They've been tighter. They've been much more likely to bump stuff up. But that's the first day in a while in which the bets of the day did not finish over 50%. So looking to bounce back today, let's go ahead and take a peek at today's board. So looking at, we are getting a lot of unique props, guys. I'm going to stick to the ones that we know. We are just going to be waiting on some injury news really for Giannis. Is he going to play or not? Because that's really going to change the whole dynamic of that game, Miami versus Milwaukee. And if he plays, well, then that's going to hurt some of the props I like. But if he sits, there's some great stacking opportunities in that game. So we'll be touching on that here. So looking at the first game, we do have the Lakers versus Memphis. And as you can see, we are missing a point spread. Why? Well, that's because Ja Morant is currently questionable. Now, I'm under the expectation that he sits tonight. And if he does sit, that's going to mean we could potentially be looking at some other players. And I think like the first one we'd want to start out with would be Jaren Jackson, because with Ja Morant off the court, Jaren Jackson does go off in a per 36 sample. Jaren Jackson with Ja Morant off the court averages 27.4 points per 36, 8.5 rebounds, 1.6 assists, 1.3 steals, 3.6 blocks. So it really does go off. And so I'm kind of just reading this off so you guys could potentially see some maybe props that you want to go in on. Does average 4.5 personal fouls, 5.5 free throws made, and about 19.4 field goal attempts per 36 with Ja Morant off the court. But really my biggest takeaway is his fantasy point total per 36. Averages 53.6 fantasy points per 36 with Ja Morant off the court. Now, if you guys remember, in the last game, this was actually a prop that I was really going in on, was Jaren Jackson Jr.'s fantasy score, because I think it was like 38 or something. Don't remember exactly, but it was one that we wanted to be going in on. And I would still say that it is still too low. It's still probably one of my more favorite ones that we are getting on the day. At the same time, it is priced up now. And we do have to think about it. And obviously, if Ja plays, less likely to hit then. But if we pull it up on the cheat sheet here, we can actually tell that based off of the Vegas odds, is going to be one of the best props that we are getting on the board today as well. So it's a good prop that I like. And if we adjust this projection for the per 36 production with Ja Morant off the court, then yes, it would be a much more appealing prop on the day. But if you combine the average sportsbook odds for all of his props for the day, they're saying that he's going to get over by a good margin. So yeah, it's probably my favorite, honestly, bet of the day as it sits right now. But this is a day in which I kind of think I want to be stacking a little bit, and that'd be one of the stacks. And then I do really want to get some sort of Luke Kennard prop, whether it's 3-pointers made, because he does chuck a bunch of 3-pointers per 36, about 8.9 3-pointers per 36 with Ja off the court, and makes about 5.1. So if we could get a prop of maybe, I don't know, 2.5 threes made from Luke Kennard, assuming he gets a little bit of a minutes bump or the minutes stay the same, I think I would like that as well. As it sits right now, I will say all the other Memphis Grizzlies players are basically propped correctly. Now, Desmond Bane, we're getting about, looking at his per 36 production, does average about 25.5 points per 36 with Ja Morant off the court. So yes, in theory, we are getting about a 2-point difference there. And sure, if we look at his like fantasy score total, does average 42.6 fantasy points per 36 with Ja Morant off the court. And I would say this is probably too low, honestly, for Desmond Bane. But if we are like using that prop, we are probably just doing that in a stack. Probably Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane over fantasy score. And then we probably would be doing that also for LeBron and AD probably as well, who they both went off in the last game. And I could see that happening again. Now, I do want to touch on LeBron's fantasy score here because on PrizePicks, it's set at 49.5. And if we just go ahead and sort by fantasy points on the specific PrizePicks cheat sheet and sort by prop line difference, we can see the biggest prop line difference we are getting is in LeBron James' fantasy score. Okay. So on Underdog, if you felt like he wasn't going to have a good game, or if you felt like he was going to have a good game, you would want to bet the over on Underdog actually and not on PrizePicks. So it's kind of a give and take there. Obviously we want to be able to stack on PrizePicks. In this scenario, you'd be better off doing it on Underdog though, because we are getting a 1.25 prop difference. That is huge. And then on the flip side of that, well, we are here just looking at it like Dylan Brooks. If you felt like he was going to have a good game, which who knows with him, you would want to bet the over fantasy points on PrizePicks and not on Underdog. And then same thing with Bam. We'll get into that game right now. So we have Milwaukee versus Miami. And given the point spread of it being 8 points favored in Milwaukee, that to me kind of leads me to believe that Giannis is going to be active. But then again, even if Giannis isn't active, you kind of expect the Bucks to have a really good game. Just given the fact that really Miami couldn't miss in the last game. And on the flip side, the Bucks couldn't make a bucket. It was just strange. Shooting percentage was down. And we just see that a lot in basketball where a team or a player will come in with a super really good night shooting one night and then that night has a terrible night shooting and vice versa. So I kind of expect the Bucks to be playing better. The weird part is if Giannis sits, it makes stacking the Bucks pretty easy as a whole because they're all kind of being undervalued. And the thing with it is, it's like even if Giannis is active, some of them, and I'm not going to say all of them, some of them can still get there. Now it is a low point total, 220. But for Miami, that's pretty high. And so looking at it, like the per 36 production for Chris Middleton with Giannis off the court is pretty awesome. He has the highest usage rate with Giannis off the court of 32.5%, which is about a 10 bump in percent of usage with him off the court. Averages 46.2 fantasy points per 36, 25.6 points, 6.9 rebounds, 7.7 assists, and about a steal and a block. Sorry, about 1.5 steals / blocks per 36. And so just looking at it, that would suggest that really a lot of Chris Middleton's props are probably too low as a whole as it sits right now. I'm more comfortable betting the fantasy score for over there, but at the same time, we have a lot of good props there with Chris Middleton. Let's go ahead and look at some of the other Bucks props. I am actually really shocked at Brook Lopez's props in general because throughout the season, and you guys remember, it was kind of just, oh, Giannis is questionable. Oh, someone from the Bucks starters are questionable. Let's go ahead and load up on Brook Lopez because he is being undervalued if one of the Bucks starters are out. And that seems to be the case today as well. Like if Giannis sits, it's going to be tough to imagine Brook not getting there. He gets about 3.3 more points fantasy points per 36. He averages about 4.4 more points per 36 for about 28.9 points. So already this one looks too low. Averages 7.5 rebounds. We're probably not touching a rebound prop with him, just as an FYI. 1.5 assists, probably not touching that as well, but we could potentially do points, rebounds, and assists where, his per 36 production suggests that he should be higher than this. And yes, I know he had a bad game in game one, all the Bucks players, but to me, like the best prop, because we are getting a little bit of a safety blanket in there, is fantasy score. He averages about 3 blocks per 36 with Giannis off the court, averages 2 3-pointers made, averages about 3 free throws. I was just looking to see if we're getting any of those props for him. But as a whole, to me, fantasy score would be the easy one to go with there for Brook if he is off the court. And let's just look at it. 0 for 3, 0 for 2 the last couple of games. He is due to have a good night shooting from 3-ball range. And it was just kind of a strange game. Didn't have that many points. He averages 15.8 on the season. And so really we are seeing that his points are already being a little bit undervalued considering that. And then if Giannis sits, that's also a good prop. So to me, I do think if he's going to be getting 35, 37 minutes, we would think, he is a player that could still get the fantasy score prop, regardless of if Giannis plays. And that being said, Drew Holiday's fantasy score is pretty low as well. He averages 46.5 fantasy points per 36 with Giannis off the court. Like, what is going on here with this one? Honestly, it's like that's the biggest difference. And so once again, I do think given this projection here of 8-point spread that Vegas thinks Giannis will play, and I kind of do as well. Like, he's going to try to play through it, but how efficient will he be if he is doing it? Now, Drew does average 9.1 assists per 36, so you could do assists as well. Points seem to be a little bit too low, averages 25.1 points, and so the 18 points here is probably too low as well. And once again, it's kind of just given the fact that the Bucks played pretty poorly in game one, minus Drew. Drew had a good game. Middleton had a good game. That I expect them all to have a better game. So even still, like, Drew has been playing some really good basketball. So even still, he could get over fantasy score here. This one is a weird one to me as well. So I do think, like, risk reward wise, you could get rewarded for just betting the over fantasy points for those three players. If Giannis sits, then you're sitting pretty. And then we aren't getting any Bobby Portis props just yet, but be on the lookout for them because he is someone that just in general has been playing better basketball lately. So he is someone I think we could target as well. Let's go ahead and look at the flip side of this game. So I already mentioned here, guys, that Bam in this game, and let's just flip this. It's PrizePicks minus Underdog's projection. On PrizePicks, you could potentially bet the over. On Underdog, maybe you want to bet the under, kind of do it in the middle there. But really, one of my biggest surprises in that game was that Kevin Love went off and Bam also had a good game. That hasn't really correlated too well this season. Now, they have been meshing together lately, but this also does feel too high. Like, if Giannis is on the court, this feels too high. So, like, I think I would rather bet the under on Underdog for Bam if Giannis is on the court. Just have an extra rim protector in there. It would make it more difficult for Bam to get. Now, it is extremely interesting because if we pull up here, we do see that Bam is actually one of the better over fantasy props at his current prop line on PrizePicks. So maybe we could do a little bit of a stack there as well, where we are betting over fantasy score for those three Milwaukee Bucks players, and then also Bam, because that does correlate as well. If Giannis is off the court, then I think it will be a little bit easier for Bam to get there as well. And then let's just look at Max Strus. Can never get his name right. His over fantasy score is pretty high there as well. Not exactly a player that I really want to target too much, but Tyler Hero is going to be off the court. And so I found it kind of strange that he did not get the over fantasy score in the last game because the minutes were there for him. He had 38 minutes in that game. And if you look at his per 36 production with Tyler Hero off the court, one, he gets the most minutes with Tyler Hero off the court by a vast amount. So I think it's safe to assume that those minutes are still going to be there for him. He averages 15.8 points per 36, about 4 rebounds, about 2.4 assists, not that many blocks and steals, but his fantasy score is 25 points. So I can see why this would be another one that we could add into kind of that stack if we were choosing to do so. So there is a good stack in that game there with those players. Now, earlier on the day, Jimmy Butler's, I think fantasy score was at, or points was at 27.5. It was actually a decent bet there. They had since bumped it up. So not really one that I'd really want to touch there. Let's go ahead and move on into the last game. We have Minnesota versus Denver. And I still think that Towns' fantasy score is extremely low. He had been someone that was going off, and simply because that team got blown out, because the Timberwolves got blown out last game, I think we're getting lower props for someone like Karl-Anthony Towns than we really should be. And yes, I know he didn't have any blocks. We need him to get a couple of blocks, it seems like. Rebounds were there, the points weren't there. 5 for 15, just, not the best game from him. At the same time, I really like the prop line that we are getting on him now. And I think there's a good stacking opportunity in this game as well. One player I want to call, which was a prop that really was ranking out well in the last game as well. It's kind of crazy. Like, this was a prop that got bumped throughout the day when this game took place. I think it was at 13.5, maybe it was at 14.5, but it got bumped up throughout the day because the sportsbooks odds kept suggesting that he'd be able to get the over. And then he only got 8 points. Now, why was that? Let's look at that. He only got 8 points on 25 minutes. If we look at his game logs, we can see 30, 44, 34. Like, he had been getting some additional run. And we look at this game against OKC, that was a little bit of a blowout. So I actually think that this one is a good prop. We can never project when a blowout is going to occur. And I do start to worry about blowouts at 8 points. So, like, I am a little bit worried there. But does it occur during the final rotation? And if that's the case, Mike Conley at 13.5 points is actually a pretty appealing prop to me, especially if we are trying to do a little bit of a game stack. If we're trying to do a little bit of a game stack, one that I don't mind would then be Jamal Murray as well over fantasy score. It's looking like a decent prop there. Just going against Minnesota, I expect him to be able to step up and continue to play. And then let's just take a peek at the other prop bets that are out there today. You could do Austin Reeves as well. That's where we're getting the biggest prop line difference. Here's an interesting one. If we're doing points, rebounds, and assists, you'd much rather do it on Underdog for Jaren Jackson Jr., where the line is 31.5, because PrizePicks has really bumped it up, so it's about a 50-50 in that regard. We can see right there. This is the PrizePicks cheat sheet, so when the prop line difference is not zero, we default to the over percent, no vig, no juice. But yeah, just looking at some other good props that are out there. We got a couple of NHL ones, which is really shocking to me because we haven't gotten any good NHL props in quite a while. They've been really tight with that. We have a bunch of MLB props here that have about a 53% chance to hit. And so that's kind of shocking that we are getting some pretty good MLB props as well. Yesterday, guys, like it's a thing. Like Monday, Tuesday, the boards are just tight. And then it really gets to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they get loosened up throughout the week. And that's what I'm seeing right now based off the props that are available. Like if we would have had these props available yesterday, it would have made really the board much easier to navigate. Then real quickly, let's just look at Underdog. And if you guys want to join Underdog, there's a link in the description below. Just kicks back some money my way if you guys use the promo code 925 spelled out like it is down on the far left-hand side, I think, for you guys. But yeah, looking at Underdog, we are getting some good props there as well. And these come and go throughout the day, but some pretty good props there. I typically don't like to do hit props, but those are fine. And here's a pretty good prop that we're getting right now. Vegas line has pitcher strikeouts at 5. Underdog currently has it set at 4.5. So a pretty good prop there. Let's go and get into today's pick. So it is tough today because I do feel like the best route that we should go with today is going to be to do some game stacks. And we are waiting on a bunch of injury news. It makes it very difficult. That's why this video is coming out later than it typically does. I was hoping we would get some more injury news. We don't have that clarity. Now, this did just pop in there for Giannis. And if he's active and 100%, that's too low, making it difficult. And whew, that's tough because yeah, if he plays and he's 100%, that's simply too low. And it's a situation where you want to make the props now because you know the lines are going to adjust. Oh, that's tough. It's low-key stressing me out there because kind of clear as day, if Giannis were to sit or not be 100%, we'd be betting over fantasy score here, over fantasy score here. This one looks good on paper with Tyler Hero out, over fantasy score for Chris Middleton, and then also for Drew Holiday. It would just work perfectly though. Now, I do still think we can do Drew. And heck, guys, I actually think 2 out of the 3 can still get there if Giannis does. And then once again, I do think Jaren Jackson Jr. can still get there if Ja Morant is active, but it becomes much more likely that he gets there if Ja Morant sits. And right now, because we don't have any score props or spread props, they don't know if he's going to play or not. And it's such a risk reward based slate. And then I do think Minnesota is going to play a better game today. Thus, I think that would come due to Towns having a good game. And then if it stays close, I do expect Mike Conley to be able to get over as well because he got 8 points in 25 minutes. You give him 10 more minutes, kind of think he gets it. It's tight, right? But that is why I kind of see today as more of a stacking slate because there is so much value out there. Some of the injury news goes the way we kind of want that we could really gain a big edge, but it is very risk reward based. And that's what makes doing this section of the video, the today's pick section of the video, more difficult and less straightforward than I would personally like it to be. So I'm assuming for you guys, you're kind of thinking the same thing as well. And like even with Luke Kennard, like I was hoping we would get a prop for him, but that's why I try to make this more informational today than other days. But that's all for today. Hopefully you guys, got some useful information out of this. It did feel like I was talking probably a little bit too much, but I do think it was hopefully you guys enjoyed the little updates that I had in there. Let's have a good slate. And as always, let's keep cashing.